Welcome back to English for All. This is our fourth video on Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare. Today I'm going to close up this series, and the next video should be about a new series, possibly about Shakespeare and his life. And today I just want to finish up by talking about the allegory in the poem and what that means. And just coming back to my original point, which is that I think this is one of the most misunderstood poems in the English language, which is remarkable when you think how famous Shakespeare is, William Shakespeare, and how famous this poem is. But as I say, Shakespeare himself is a mystery, remarkably a mysterious character, and there's a reason for that, and we'll talk about that another time. We know very little about William Shakespeare, in fact, but we have this enormous body of work that this individual left behind of such extremely wonderful quality that it makes him one of the most mysterious figures in literature, in the English language. And he's also at the top. He's the greatest of all. Anyway, today we're going to focus on the final lines of the poem, and I'm going to explain why I think the poem is misunderstood. Why, instead of being a poem about love, it's a poem about friendship. Rather than him writing about a woman or his wife or a mistress, Shakespeare is almost certainly talking about his patron, a powerful lord who would have protected Shakespeare when he was young and who would have stood by him throughout his career. Even later on, when Shakespeare no longer needed protection, the lord who was his patron would have still protected him and promoted him at court. And again, we'll talk about that in the future. So the first half of the poem is comparative. The second half of the poem is declarative, as I said in the last video. In the first half of the poem, Shakespeare compares his friend to summer, and he establishes that his friend is not a fair weather friend. That is, a friend who comes and goes when things are good and then leaves when things go bad. Shakespeare's patron, Shakespeare's friend, is a steady friend, a stable friend who is always there for him, a true friend, rather than a fair weather friend. And then in the second half of the poem, there's a tone change which marks that. There's a transitional section where Shakespeare talks about how all things that are beautiful fade, all beauty fades, and all things die. And then makes an incredibly declarative statement where he says that his friend will not die, his friend will not age, his friend will not lose his beauty, and his friend will not die. And then he says these incredible lines at the end. He says, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Now, I hope everybody, particularly students, are looking at the poem, and you can see it in front of you. It's easy to find on the internet, and some of you may even have it physically from school. Note the pronoun this, there. Pronouns are some of the most abused words in the English language, particularly with juniors. Juniors tend to replace nouns with pronouns. So instead of making a clear statement about what they're talking about, they tend to use pronouns, it, they, and so forth. And that makes the statements that they make vague, because a pronoun doesn't give you much information. It just identifies a category of the person or the thing that you're talking about, but it doesn't tell you exactly what that is. And this, THIS, is probably the most abused pronoun in the English language, particularly in student writing. Any students who are watching this in any country, I don't know how wide these videos can travel. As I understand the internet, they could be viewed all over the world, but I don't know if my YouTube is restricted to my country, Australia, or not. Somebody perhaps let me know that in the comments. If you're watching from other countries, please contact me and let me know where you're from and how your work is going. But just read over your work and look to see how often you use the pronoun this. And if you're using it a lot, then you really need to reflect on that and think about it. So let's just have a look what he says there. He says, your eternal summer shall not fade. That's line number 9. Nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag, thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. What is he talking about, do you think? This, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. I come back to my question in the last video about how can William Shakespeare, this great poet, still young at this stage, it's not at 18, he's only a young man. He knows he's a genius, and he knows that he's going to be remembered. But how can he be so sure that he'll be remembered forever? And what can a young poet like William Shakespeare offer to this great lord who protects him, this powerful man who goes to court and who probably knows Queen Elizabeth? He may not know her very well, but he probably knows her. Shakespeare certainly didn't. He's far too low class for that. The Queen almost certainly never met William Shakespeare in person. She would have probably heard of him, but she probably never met him. But the lord who protected Shakespeare would have known Elizabeth, almost certainly. And what can Shakespeare possibly offer to this man who has everything? Well, it's really quite obvious when you think about it. He offers him the only thing that he has to offer. He offers him fame in his poem. And of course, that's what the pronoun is referring to. This is referring to the poem, this poem. So long lives this poem, and this poem gives life to thee. So he's saying to the Lord, he's not literally offering his lordship immortality. That's not possible. That's not for William Shakespeare to offer. He can't make that offer. Nobody can. But what he's saying is that my poetry is going to live forever. And therefore, because I'm talking about you in this poem, you're going to be remembered forever too. You're coming with me into eternity. Thank you for all the things you've done for me over the years. I really needed your help when I first started out. I was struggling, and I know I have a great talent. I know my works are going to be celebrated in the future. Just like Beethoven knew that his great works, he was more successful perhaps. Oh no, they're about the same. But he knew that his work would live on. And he knew that artists in the future would look to his work and follow his lead, even though some of his works were controversial and not as recognised then as they are now. That's Beethoven, Ludwig van Beethoven, the great composer. Shakespeare obviously knew that too. And that's what he's saying to the Lord here in Sonnet 18, his lordship, his protector, his patron, that I am taking you with me into immortality. I'm going to be famous forever. And I'm going to take you into the future. The one thing that the Lord cannot get with all his money and all his power is immortality. That's the one thing that he can't have. And so Shakespeare offers him that. It's incredibly audacious and cheeky kind of thing to say. And Shakespeare must have been quite a character. And we'll talk more about that again another time. He must have been quite a character. So there we go. That's Sonnet 18. I hope that all makes sense. I'm just going to read the poem one final time before I close this video. Please leave any comments. Please subscribe to the video if you like these. There's going to be many more in the future where I talk about other poems, modern poems, old poems, stories, plays perhaps. And just think about what I've been discussing in these last 4 videos. And as you listen to the poem, see if that now makes it clearer what exactly the writer is saying here. He says, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Thank you very much.